we're very excited to introduce our first session. I will introduce all the speakers after this, just because our Canada is talking. But we're going to have Mubdi and Samantha give us a beautiful presentation. At least they're on time of boarding, indeed. So Samantha is a career services agent and works with career services and has lots of experience with guiding graduate students to positions in industry and beyond. And Mubdi is the principal and founder of the company Sidrat, which connects or acts at the interface between academics and industry. So I'm very excited to have them present, and I will introduce our panel speakers when we come to that. So please take it away, and thank you very much for agreeing to present with us today.
No problem. Thank you so much. And I will just stick to presenting in English. I won't go into the French translation as Air Canada does. But that was very amusing. Thank you so much for thank you so much for joining us today on a very interesting topic. Mubdi and I are going to be talking about job searching and connecting with the right people to land the job. And I would just like to start by saying our University of Victoria Territory Acknowledgement. We acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, Songhees, and Hosepsum peoples on whose territory the university stands, and the Lekwungen and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. I am speaking from my home in Langford today, which is not precisely on the same lands that UVic is, but I am also incredibly appreciative to live and love and play on this beautiful territory. Very, very appreciative. So the agenda for today, we are going to do some introductions. Mubdi's gonna set the stage for you regarding careers. And then I'm gonna jump in with some practical tips, talking a little bit about how to maybe do a mindset shift, shift your mind in order to approach industry careers or non-academic careers. And then I'm gonna really try to reinforce how important it is to connect with people in order to start your professional world. And then I'm going to share some resources, and then of course the Q&A. And now I will pass it over to Mubdi.
Thank you so much, Samantha, and thank you so much to everyone who's organized this, as well as to all the attendees. It's exciting to be able to chat with you about this. So just a little bit about who I am. I'm the principal and founder of Sidrat Research. We are a company that basically helps scientists do science better. So at the interface between academia and industry, we're here basically to do the things that are often really hard to do within universities, and bring sort of industrial and professional level to it. So we worked on scientific projects all around the globe. And we are a private company, a private for-profit company. So that's been fun to see what that actually means. But I'm going to, Samantha slide is presenting the slide, so I'll have to just let her know when I need to have the slide advanced. So I think this is the key point that I want to bring up. There is no pipeline for astrophysics PhDs to industry, right? Just get the truth out there, and that'll start helping us deal with what the consequences of that are. You can think of a lot of professions where that is not the case, right? If you would become a professional engineer or a licensed engineer, you can, rely on your professional industry organization to do this. You can help they will get you, help you understand what the job path looks like. Lawyers, same deal. You have things like the Law Society of Ontario. I'm based in Toronto, so that's the one I'm familiar with. College of Physicians and Surgeons, if you're in medical school. We do not have that. So what that means is that you get to choose your own adventure for better or for worse. And I would like to think for better. But it does mean that there's no one path to what a job or a career with an astro or physics PhD into the larger industrial world, what that looks like. It's all about sort of building strategies and coming up with ways that you can find and make a career for yourself. Let's go to the next slide. So oftentimes when we talk about industrial jobs, and I'm sure a lot of you, especially if you're thinking of going down this path, have had conversations with your supervisors or other people in your departments, or sometimes maybe not. I certainly know some grad students who've been afraid to tell their supervisors because they're worried of what they'll think. I understand the taboo that comes with that. But in either case, oftentimes we talk about the culture shocks of going from academia to industry. One premise that is often misunderstood here is we think of academia and industry being two equal things. The vast majority of the world is industry. Academia is actually like a very, very small pocket, and most people work in non-academic jobs, right? That is just the world that we live in. But secondly, it's that we often talk about the culture shocks in specifically going from academia to an industrial job. So something that is at a university or a university affiliated location to something that is at a for-profit or governmental or etc. And those culture shocks do exist, right? Who you're reporting to, what you're responsible for, do matter and do change. But more often than not, the culture shocks that really get people, and they often don't think about them this way, is the culture shocks of going from grad school to the larger world. An example that I have with this is, and these are culture shocks that would happen regardless of if you stayed in academia. They would be if you went to a postdoc, these culture shocks would exist. If you went into a staff scientist position or even a faculty position, these culture shocks certainly exist. An example that I like to come up with is I was having a conversation with a friend who was actually hiring in academia, actually in something academia adjacent, for a scientist, and the role that they were hiring for. We have somebody who probably would be out of a PhD or out of a first postdoc, essentially. And talking to a bunch of people who were doing informational interviews with him. And one of the people right off the bat said, he was talking about how one of the things in this role that gives him a lot of pleasure is finishing things, is being able to be done something and move it on to the next, move on to the next project. And the person said, I don't think I actually like that. I actually think I like sort of dabbling. That's my thing. I really enjoy that. And what he interpreted that as is this person actually enjoyed being in grad school, right? That's one of the areas that we make sure that there's a lot of room for grad students to dabble. One of the things you'll notice, especially after you leave school of any sort, is that you actually have responsibilities to deliver. And that's one of the big culture shocks that often occurs in understanding what does that responsibility look like. So this is it's important to sort of just isolate and separate when we talk about culture shocks of leaving grad school, there's a couple that'll come and they come from different directions. Let's go to the next slide. All of this to say, because so much of what's driven in academia is phenomenology based, right? Like if you are working on AGN, chances are you're not going to apply for a cosmology postdoc. You're going to be working for an AGN or something related to it. That's what we often prioritize. In the rest of the world, that's not the case. The idea is that the phenomena is often something that you can pick up. It's what you can do. So what you studied is much, much less important than what you can actually do. And there's a lot that you learn to do in graduate school, especially as a PhD or as a master's in astronomy or in astronomy and physics, that is what you want to focus on and what you want to highlight. And that's how you need to approach looking for a job in industry as a whole. And I believe with this, I'm passing it back to Samantha to talk a little bit about strategies of how that works.
Great, thank you so much, Mubdi. And I'm just going to adjust my settings here so that I can see who I want to see. There we go. Okay, so just introducing myself. So yes, I am the career educator at UVic for students in the faculties of science and health. And I do have experience, lots of experience helping grad students with everything that you need from during that transition time from grad school to career. So, and at the end of our presentation today, I will share some a QR code where you can reach out and make an appointment with me if you need to. So, practical tips. This is something that I think is really important for anyone to know. I tried to break it down into kind of 4 steps that are kind of really vital in order to successfully, in order to have a successful job search. So one of the first things I would say is when you are looking for work, it is incredibly important to understand and kind of get to know the language of the employer. Because when you are applying to jobs, it's also very important to make sure that your application documents, so in this case, I'm talking specifically about resumes and cover letters, it's really important that they are tailored to the job and the position you're going for. It's really not going to be, you're not going to be a successful applicant in this day and age if you're sending out a generic document for all of the roles you want to apply to. You really have to understand the language and the goals and the values of the employer. Secondly, it's really important to get a sense of who is hiring. And we'll talk a little bit about that also going forward. Excuse me, I had raspberries in my yogurt, and I'm very aware of maybe a raspberry. Anyway, so sorry, back to this. So it's really important to target specific companies, get to know who's hiring, and kind of create like a wish list of your top maybe 15 to 20. And then once you have that list of the companies that are hiring, who's hiring, where are they hiring, then it's also important to find out who are the people involved in this work, who are the decision makers, where do they post jobs, what is their hiring timeline like, and how can you get to know this information? Follow them on LinkedIn. Find them on LinkedIn, follow them, send a message, and then that's because that's the 4th step, is what I would say is how crucial it is to connect with people. LinkedIn is the easiest kind of low risk way to connect with people who can potentially get you a job, either find people that you may work for one day or work with one day. When it comes to the aspect of tailoring your application documents, I wanted to touch on this aspect as well. I have seen a lot of, when I meet with many PhD students, they are very used to an academic CV, which completely makes sense. That's great. But when you are applying to jobs outside of academia, you don't use a CV. You really need to use a resume, and there are some key differences here. I won't go through all of them, but basically it has to be 1 to 2 pages. So which means 1 sheet of paper double-sided. So it has to be really concise, and it has to speak to your skills and what you can do for the employer. When I was speaking to Mubdi last week, when we were planning, one thing that that resonated with me is that a CV is a list of this is what I have done, and a resume is this is what I can do. And so I really like that, and I'm going to steal that and keep that in all my slides going forward. Then, okay, cover letters too. Cover letters is a really important aspect of knowing how to approach writing them, because it's incredibly important to read the job posting and ensure that your cover letter addresses the major points in the job posting. You don't need to address everything in the job posting, but it should address ways that you will learn and acquire any missing pieces. Or another strategy too is that, so I've got an example here of how you can approach a cover letter. One strategy that I've seen is very successful is when you're looking at a job posting under the responsibilities, for example, what are 2 to 3 bullet points from the job posting that really resonate with you, that you have evidence of doing, that you're really excited to do for the employer? In your cover letter, that's where you can expand on providing the evidence that you can do those things in 2 to 3 of the body paragraphs of the cover letter. I do have this sample that I can share with people at the end if you're interested. I won't go through it all today, but just wanted to touch on that, how important a cover letter is. Talking now about a mindset shift. So it's really vital as well to not use your application documents as a platform to list every responsibility you ever had. You have to describe it in a way that matters to the person reading it. So even thinking back to, I don't know, high school, like when you're learning how to write an essay, you have to write it for your reader. Who is the reader in this case? It's a hiring manager. They may not have the same academic background as you. So you have to really be able to put yourself in their head if you can, and write it in a way that matters to them. So how does your skill set fit with the responsibilities of the job? Can you do the job? Have you explained on your resume that you can do the job? You have to really be explicit about how you meet their needs. Don't make them guess. And then how is this relevant? I think in my job, I think I say the word relevant the most out of any word, because it really is the information on your document relevant to the hiring manager? Is it relevant to the employer? If it isn't, then maybe you need to word it in a different way that will make it relevant, or maybe you need to think of removing it, or maybe that's not the job for you because it has to be relevant to them. One thing too, a little nugget of wisdom that Mubdi shared with me that I'm going to steal forever is that he suggested that when he saw some documents that were really effective, what the person did was they added some bullet statements either in the education section or under experience, and separating the project, like for your thesis, separating the project from the professional skills you demonstrated. And I thought that was brilliant, because when you are working on a thesis, you are also sharing or performing professional skills that an employer will want. And you need to, again, be explicit that you have those skills. This is just an example here, and I won't go through all of it, but just kind of showing the difference between, so if you're looking at a job posting, for example, the policy analyst role. So on the job posting for the policy analyst, under requirements, it may say that they want you to synthesize scientific research and provide evidence-based recommendations. What someone with a CV might write is the second, in the second column there, where, you know, they're really focusing on what are the academic skills, how is it related to academia. But you need to kind of do that mindset shift for your resume and write it in a way that matters to the hiring manager. And one way to do that is on the bottom of the right column, talking about basically, so an action verb and then the skill, measurable result, business relevance. Another way of thinking about it is you're trying to describe for every bullet point what you did, how you did it, so what kind of tools, what kind of methodology, and why you did it. In businesses and companies, they're really they really care about outcome, impact, results. Is it measurable? Is the thing, like, how did the thing that you do, how did what you did? That's a terrible English. So what you did it have an impact? Why did you do the thing you did? Did it have like it, did you increase something? Did you make something better? So that's the kind of way to think about it. What you did, how you did it, and why you did it. And I also wanted to talk about here, this is a really vital part of the job search is connecting. Connecting with people is incredibly important. And in my world, we kind of call the hidden job market is the job market where that you find by connecting with people, by making professional connections, because about 20%, and I'm not sure how accurate these numbers are, they change often, but some people say that about 20% of jobs are posted and 80% of them you will find through connections. And especially in this day and age, it really is about who you know, not what you know when it comes to getting a job. For example, I have a story of there was he just graduated, Luke Cheddar, a former physics and astronomy co-op student of the year. He networked his way into 4 consecutive terms with the Canadian Space Agency by finding people that could get him into a position. And his first term was partially made possible by connecting with a former nominee for Co-op Student of the Year, who had worked 2 prior summers for the Canadian Space Agency. You can reach out to former colleagues, you can reach out to industry peers, you can reach out to association members and community contacts. It's really vital to seek opportunities to learn, contribute, and stay connected. And it's again, I can't emphasize how important it is. There's also ways, so connecting, you can connect in different ways. You can attend job fairs, you can attend networking events, do informational interviews. But as I mentioned before, messaging people who work at the companies that you're interested in is a great way and kind of a more low risk way of connecting with people. On LinkedIn, if you don't have a LinkedIn page, I really recommend creating a profile. And I really get it for any of you who might be a little bit hesitant about the thought of networking, or maybe it kind of makes you not feel very good. I get it. I recently transitioned from a different career. I was a teacher in the public school system, and I wanted to get out. I wanted to move in a different direction, and I never had to network previously. So learning how to network kind of made me feel like really nervous, a little bit of anxiety associated with it. But I swear, as soon as the first time you try it and you get a positive response from someone, it's very encouraging. And then I just kind of kept the ball rolling, and now I do it all the time. So it's just like anything with learning any new skill. It takes, once you practice, it gets better with time. So if you are on LinkedIn, what you could do easily is go to the UVic LinkedIn page. You click on that alumni tool, and then there in the keyword search, you would you would type in the keyword of a role you're looking for, maybe someone who has already transitioned from doing a PhD to an industry role. You can find them, and then you send them a message. And if you wanted to talk more about that, again, I'll share the link at the end of the slides to make an appointment with me, and we can go through it together. I'm trying to, there we go. Whoops, clicked too many times. I did not want to play that. Okay, so if you are curious about the whole, even the act of making small talk, I get you. It is something, again, that if you're not used to doing, it takes some practice. You've been trained to talk about science. You're for like, I don't know how many, like a lot of years. So it makes sense that you may not be used to this aspect of connecting with people. And I've got some great resources here. There is a great video here by Matt Abrams. He's got a podcast as well, and he's got a book coming out called Think Faster, Talk Smarter. And it's a wonderful video. So we will share this presentation at the end so you can have a look at what Matt Abrams has to say about how to make small talk. In addition to, there we go. I won't play that for you now, but I wanted to also share that I found some other really great resources here from a wonderful Elena Levine. She's let me see, at least on there. She's the president for Quantum Solutions, and she she has a book called Networking for Nerds, and the video there on YouTube, a couple of videos on YouTube talking about the importance of networking. I apologize, I'm not trying to call you nerds. This is her words, so hopefully that's okay. But she has some really great tips in her book and also in her video about how important it is to collaborate and connect with people. And there we go. And then kind of moving on to resources now, there's some pretty important resources that you should consider looking into. There two of them are some professional associations, so the Canadian Astronomical Society and the American one as well. And if you haven't looked into if you haven't looked into these resources yet, I would take a look. Some of some of the information on the pages are incredibly valuable for you. Not only do they have job postings, but there's career resources. There's list of other astronomy PhDs who have moved into industry, and kind of talking about their job profile, how they found the job. It's a really great idea to consider joining as a member to these societies while you're a student, because it's a reduced cost. It's about $70 while you're still a student to join each of these societies. And I would really consider having a look, checking it out. And the same too, LinkedIn can be a really important way to find a job. And so I would say consider creating and maintaining a profile. In addition to those resources, there are so many out there that can be, again, incredibly helpful. There are some podcasts, there's blogs about the transition from PhDs to careers. And then one of these, so in the lower left there, if you haven't heard of the Graduate and Postdoctoral Development Network, that is also a really great resource. I would consider checking that out. And if you do become a member, you have access to all of their past career symposia videos, where one of the people that I met from being part of that network is Ketan Marbali, who is a wonderful human who works at the University of Toronto. So he's also on LinkedIn, and part of his job is kind of mine at the U of T, to help those. He's a graduate and postdoctoral career advisor, but he also has a PhD, and he posts very frequently on LinkedIn. So I would check him out on LinkedIn as well. He's a great resource, a great person to have in your network. There's also, I would like to just mention PhD Paths is a great website. If the best part of this website is that you can sign up to get what they call like a basic database. And what it is it's a Google sheet with a large number of names of people who have, it kind of lists their degrees and what their jobs are now and how they found their career, etc. But also, are they happy to be contacted? Yes. And their contact info is in there so that you can connect with them and ask them about everything that they've done to get where they want to be or where they are today. And then if you wanted to pay a little bit more, you can get in the exclusive database of contacts. And then lastly, as I mentioned, if you did want to connect with me to talk about anything that I mentioned in more detail, please feel free to make an appointment and I would be happy to assist you. And and then I'm going to pass it back to Mubdi. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. So thanks so much, Samantha. I just want to sort of complete the bookend of some of the great resources that Samantha just provided, with a couple of sort of larger, longer term questions that you should be asking yourself as you approach this journey. Um, think about this as a long-term career, right? Like a lot of what you'll be thinking about right now is how do I get my foot in? How do I get the job? How do I get a job? What jobs exist for that? But start thinking about it in terms of what do I want the rest of my career to look like? And that can be very highly varied. People can jump around a lot and change direction midstream. But it does mean that you don't want to be thinking about just the next year. You want to be thinking about the next 5 or 10 years and what you would like your contributions to be. You didn't go into a PhD in astronomy because you wanted to be a boring person, right? You didn't want to go into a random, I'm going to just start insulting things, and you didn't want to go into an accounting firm, right? That's not why you're doing this. You wanted to do something that was interesting, and so you should be treating how you plan for the next bit of your career in that way, and trying to make those opportunities happen, or figure out how you actually can optimize to be open to those opportunities. One thing that I have noticed, for especially people who are 5 years on or 6 years on in a job that they've received, is or they've gotten within a technical degree, specifically astronomy or physics, often is that they run into something called the technical glass ceiling. Within especially private organizations, if you get hired into a technical role, you'll probably stay in that technical role. And so there's often not a lot of career mobility there, including things like leadership. And so thinking about how, having the expertise, the technical expertise, you have, this fantastic background in both, analytic tools and mathematics and physics and astronomy specifically and data analysis, et cetera, but then leveraging that to know more about leadership. How do you get other people on board? Because really, the way careers work is at some point you're doing the things, and at some point to progress, you are helping others do that thing in general in a larger thing. And so being aware that there is such a thing as a technical glass ceiling, and that really spreading your wings at some point beyond just what you can bring to the table technically is going to be critical. The next slide I have here is something I also find really important, and I would actually make a recommendation right now because you'll want to do this in general, especially for your career, but it's good to know this now and get into practice. Understand what the business side of the organization you're a part of or want to be a part of actually does, i.e., follow the money, because generally that is what they actually care about and how they operate. And understand what does that mean. I'm not saying optimize for, again, you did not go into a career where the intention is to become a billionaire. Some of you may become billionaires. That's fantastic. But that's not why you went into this. But you do need to understand what makes the money side of any organization work. How do they afford things? How are they paying? Why are they paying people? And so one of the recommendations, especially for the grad students here, we often don't do this in science. We don't talk about the money, but the money is a very important aspect of it because it lets us know how do we allocate resources? How do we do science? Should we be paying for a postdoc or a grad student or a couple undergrads? All of that's going through your faculty member or your supervisor's head. So starting the conversation by asking, like, how much do I cost? Right? And the answer is it's going to be more than your salary. So just trying to get a sense of scale of how does money work within this, because it's just another constraint on how to make all of this work. I think that's where I want to leave you and really give folks an opportunity to open up for questions. But yeah, happy to take questions at this point.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mubdi and Samantha, for a brilliant start to our workshop. I'm going to start by introducing our two extra panel members. We have two people who were astronomy postdocs and are now in different roles in industry. We have Megan Tannock, who switched in 2022, and she's now working for Cosmographic software, or software, on their universe simulator, as well as Ryan Jackson, who is now the manager at a not-for-profit Covenant House in Vancouver. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A that will be monitored. Otherwise, we have some questions from when we first set up that we'll start with. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Brianna. You guys sent in a lot of questions with your registration form, so we're going to start with some of those, but please add more in the chat, Brianna said. So first one to any of our speakers, I think we got this one a lot. What jobs are there besides data science?
I guess I can talk a little. So when I started my journey of leaving academia and looking for a job in industry, and by industry, I just mean not a postdoc, anything, government, other positions at a university, maybe teaching, where I ended up ultimately a video game company. That's what I mean by like leaving academia. I was genuinely shocked at the variety of stuff my colleagues were going into when they were leaving academia. Like I know former astronomers that are in video games. I'll start there because I am technically in the video game industry, even though Space Engine, the program we make, is technically not a game. We exist in like a game space. So I'm in video games. I know two other former astronomers who are in video games. One works for a company that was absorbed by EA, and another works for a company that's based out of Toronto doing like mobile games. I was genuinely shocked at the variety of stuff my colleagues were going into when they were leaving academia. Like I know former astronomers that are in video games. I'll start there because I am technically in the video game industry, even though Space Engine, the program we make, is technically not a game. We exist in like a game space. So I'm in video games. I know two other former astronomers who are in video games. One works for a company that was absorbed by EA, and another works for a company that's based out of Toronto doing like mobile games. I know people who work in like the Ministry of Health. I know people that work in climate change. I know people that work in microfluidics doing like oil stuff in Alberta. I know multiple people who work at banks. I know people who work in real estate. I know people who work in insurance. Like they're just, you have a lot of skills. You can do anything basically. That's very general, but the answer is very broad. So. Oh,
yeah,
Mubdi,
I think
you're
sorry,
muted.
Yeah, I think Ryan, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm probably not the best person to answer this because that was my exact journey, was to go data science and then to management. But I would echo what Megan said, that I know a lot of my friends that moved to various different roles, some data related, but doing different things, some not doing anything to do with what they were previously doing. Even people that do jobs that are not even coding related anymore, because the like soft analytical skills and even things like public speaking skills and those sorts of things that you are trained to do during your graduate studies, like, are really sought after across a wide range of industries.
So just to add, one of the things that I found is a sweet spot for people with an astronomy background are the positions and roles where you can take a complex problem that has some technical aspect to it and be able to understand the level of technicalness that needs to be understood in that problem and convey it to the people who are making the decisions or help make those decisions. And that goes into a wide different diversity of fields, and that's not just one job title. So a couple examples of this is somebody I went to grad school with is now doing a lot with the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation because they're trying to understand and figure out how, on the financial side, they can deal with the housing crisis in Canada. Somebody else has been working in a role at the Gates Foundation working on maternal public health in a wide variety of countries simply because that is a very highly analytic, data-driven process to try to understand how to increase or how to decrease maternal mortality, for instance. Those are not jobs that are advertised, right? Those are jobs that like you wouldn't put a job ad out for because you know that that job ad is going to give you people that you don't want, and it's usually through talking to people or figuring out what is the actual skill set that people then get approached or networks are sifted through. I will, however, also say, especially here in Toronto, there is a bit of a pipeline from an Astro PhD to TD Bank and Royal
And
Bank and
Scotiabank.
Loblaws Bank, yes. Largely because what they found is there's a couple of teams within those banks that back in the early 90s decided we can't find people to do this. Actuaries are actually the wrong people to do this, especially when it comes to some of this risk management that's a lot fluffier than, doing insurance predictions and calculating insurance rates. We need to find people who are comfortable with numbers, are comfortable with really random problems. And so they tried to hire astronomers. They worked out really well. Those people became managers. They then hired more astronomers. And now there's this astronomy to bank pipeline, if that is your thing. But that is, just a random example of where the right people in the right places made a pipeline exist.
If we have time, I can elaborate a little bit more concretely on what I applied to. So I applied for several different jobs in very different fields that I felt I was well qualified for. So ultimately, I ended up in the video games industry, but I also applied for a teaching position at Vancouver Island University. I applied for a policy fellowship with the Canadian federal government. I applied for a wind tunnel researcher position for the AlphaTauri F1 team, which I was super stoked about. I got a request for more information, but ultimately no interview, unfortunately. I also applied to be the Gemini contact for Canada. I applied to be a resident astronomer at CFHT, but then I withdrew my application because I decided I didn't want to live in Hawaii. I applied for a lot of very, very different things that were not strictly academia, and I felt like I was really qualified for all of them. Cannot hear you, Emily.
I figured that out. Thank you so much. That's a wonderful. There we go. Having a little bit of internet issues. But on that note, we'll move on to our second question. How available are R&D jobs related to astronomy, and where does one find these? So maybe what kind of, Megan, it sounds like you applied to a lot. Where were you looking for kind of these positions?
So it's through the government website, the NRC. Hang on, I can get you a link. I could put it in the chat. The NRC is the main place to look. It's not the only place to look, but NRC for sure. And that's through the government website. One sec. Someone else talk.
I would say in more traditional private industry, there are lots of R&D jobs. In fact, a little tidbit I like to throw out here is a question. I'll open up to the entire floor. What do people think is the biggest program supporting research in Canada in terms of dollars given to research by the federal government? Happy to take guesses. Feel free to throw them in the chat or unmute and say them. And I should say that it is so big that it actually is much bigger than every other program combined.
I'm just going to
We have
go
NSERC, we have CSA. Any other guesses? Defense is another good guess.
Something medical.
Medical, mining resources, climate. The answer is none of these. The answer is a program called the Scientific and Research and Experimental Development Program that every private company is allowed to actually submit for and gets money for. It is bigger than the combination of all other research funds across Canada. And this is people doing scientific research and experimental development in companies, like in for-profit companies. I believe it's like 2/3 of all research funding goes to this. And so there is a lot of these companies have research wings or research projects that are in them, or things that they classify as research. Um, Oftentimes they won't be explicitly advertised. And so figuring out what the company does and what kind of research that they're doing. So a good example of this is if you take a look at like IBM uses a bunch of these credits, and what they are care about is they are actually trying to make the fastest databases for their larger corporate clients. What's a great system of data to actually be able to transmit and test on is sufficiently complex? Turns out it's actually often astronomical data. And so there's a lot of astronomers actually working in IBM to do this. If you're familiar with the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, that's because Microsoft invested a ton of money into the database systems there because they're trying to optimize their databases to sell to commercial clients. So there's a ton of research that goes on in really weird ways that it can be astronomy adjacent or astronomy related that happens in private companies.
Mubdi triggered a thought for me as well. The aerospace industry in Canada is growing rapidly, especially with respect to satellite launching. In Nova Scotia, especially, I know there's a launch site in Cape Breton. Halifax is a hotspot for aerospace. There's even companies in places you wouldn't expect. There's a small satellite company, I can't think of the name of it right now. It's in Stratford, Ontario, known for their Shakespeare plays, but also apparently aerospace. So.
Wonderful. I think that's great. Our next question is kind of similar. Where should people start looking? But I think I'll kind of link that with something I saw in the chat, which is in related to what Mubdi said or Samantha talked about. There's quite a bank pipeline for fundamental finance. But we want to be speaking the language of these employers. What is the right job title to be looking for in like a bank setting that's going to kind of highlight on all these technical skills that we have that we're able to communicate that we fit in nicely too?
So in my experience, and I'm happy to have people disagree with me, but the job titles are mostly invented. More often than not, what happens is people realize they have a problem. They realize that they can talk to people who might be able to solve their problem, and they proactively work together to figure out what that job is. And then if they have a large enough organization that they have a separate HR, they then go their separate ways and not talk to one another until the job ad ends. They get a email saying, hey, there's a job that you might want, and then they apply for that job. And so that's why, just to throw this in, if you are getting frustrated by sending out a bunch of random resumes and not hearing back, this is one of the reasons, is because oftentimes we do this dance, especially in Canada, of, hey, we're going to advertise for a job that we know you're going to get, because we kind of have to do that. So the job title is, yeah, the job titles can be actually quite random and can be developed on that. And so my takeaway from that would be your best bet is actually to not rapid fire apply to a bunch of jobs. It is to start having conversations with people, start knowing people, like getting to know people who know people. And so, for instance, if I'm happy to join people's LinkedIn, LinkedIn just happens to be where a lot of jobs in with people with our skill set will often be. And if there's somebody that you see is at an organization, ask the person that you know to do an introduction, right? More people are more than happy about that, to be able to do that, especially when it comes to people with unique skills. Because so I've done a lot of hiring, and especially for my organization, one of the most challenging things is you don't want to go through another job season, right? You don't want to actually look through a bunch of resumes where the vast majority of them are not going to even be slightly qualified. You want to find the person who's going to do the thing that you need them to do, and you want to get that person as quickly as possible. So the quicker you can help the team that actually wants to do that, the happier everyone will be in that pipeline. HR is often in the middle to make sure laws are followed and that legal requirements are dealt with and the liability is low. It's more often than not you want to talk to the people who's actually doing the thing, and then they can figure out how to work the HR pipeline.
Yeah, I would also agree. Like a lot of the jobs, I mean, just for a data scientist as an example, because that's what I'm familiar with, there is no like protected characteristic of what a data scientist is. Like that doesn't mean anything necessarily. So you'll often find that like what a data scientist does at one organization is completely different to what a data scientist does at another organization. So my advice would be, and this is not always true, companies don't always do this, but usually you'll get an indication of what they're actually looking for if you read the job description in detail. The kind of skills that they're looking for or what the responsibilities of the job will probably tell you more what the job is than the title itself. I definitely found that like it can vary wildly, and that depends on what your interests are as well. Like, do you want to be somebody who's doing more machine learning or more like analytics side of things? Like, it can vary hugely. So don't just rely on job titles.
Okay, that's a great answer from everyone there. Our next question that was common from our survey was looking at kind of different types of jobs, remote, hybrid, and in person. Do you guys have any sense of how common each one is, depending on people's preference? Experience?
I think from my perspective, a lot of places will do hybrid these days, I think is the most common that I've been seeing. Hybrid is a weird middle ground as well, where hybrid at some place can be 1 day every month or fortnight, and some places it means 4 days a week. Oftentimes that depends on who your boss is and how often they come in based on their hybrid version. So yeah, I think it's definitely reasonable to expect to be getting a position where you can work from home multiple days a week. Especially in the types of jobs that we do, oftentimes whilst coming into an office and collaborating with people can be helpful sometimes, it's not always mandatory, and a lot of people work on their own for extended periods of time. So it's definitely possible.
I would say that remote is hard these days. Most places will not hire remote for a variety of different reasons. One is because if they truly are remote, it's often because they're off-siting or they're trying to go to a lower cost labor market is one of the things. So you'll see a lot of places that were hiring for remote people, but really they're actually just looking for people who are based out of countries with a lower cost of employment, essentially. Because if you're truly remote, you're not going to pay somebody a New York salary if your company's based in New York. You're going to pay them wherever they minimize. And so those jobs have gotten super competitive when they exist. And what I've seen actually more likely happen is people who have been in the organization and then get promoted, or then them moving and their job saying, "We want you so badly, we will let you work remote through that." And so that's what I've seen the pathway to remote jobs look more like. In terms of hybrid versus in person, I think most places, with the exception of the federal government in the province of Ontario, have acknowledged that there's some level of hybridness to like just it deals with a lot of flexibility that otherwise you'd have to figure out ways to record and deal with, and just causes headaches. So, for instance, for our organization, for Sidrat, everyone is in office. It is not considered a hybrid job, but 1 day a week, everyone can work from wherever they want. And we can change that around. It's very meant to be flexible, and then to be, if you need to take a vet appointment or if you need to go to a doctor's, you don't need to worry about it. You don't need to tell anyone. And this is how we've like decreased the stress of trying to bean count, how many hours people are working, etc. So I think that's become a lot more flexible. Sadly, there is also, when it comes to federal or government jobs or government related jobs, there is a bit of a political contention about it. And so there's been all these callbacks to like return to work and things like that, which we'll see how long they go for.
My company is absolutely fully 100% remote. We are all in very different places, different cities, different countries. I know other people have fully, truly remote jobs like mine, but they are more rare. I think the sort of hybrid thing that was being discussed before is much more common. But I've seen hybrid mean you're in office 3 days a week. I've seen hybrid mean you're in office 1 day a month. It really depends on the company. I think hybrid roles to me seem more common than fully in office jobs. I think hybrid's the most common. So if you're fortunate enough to want to, find your community in a big city like Toronto or Montreal, you might have more options than if you're in a smaller town. But I know people that live in Peterborough and commute 1 day a month to do their 1 day in office in Toronto. So something like that also offers flexibility.
Wonderful. I see we're getting a lot of questions in the chat, so I'll switch to that. This one was answered by Samantha, but I think it's worth pitching to the rest of the group. If you're reaching out to a hiring manager, should that be before or after you send in the application? And kind of what's a great way to break maybe the ice? Like how do we intro talking to a hiring manager?
I suspect Samantha might have an answer to this based on what I saw in the talk, but not to
Sure.
hear you, Samantha.
No, sure. Go ahead. I couldn't keep up with it. I can't remember if I mentioned. So I injured my back on the weekend and I've taken a Robaxacet, so my brain's working a little slowly today. So yeah, so the best way to reach out to someone, a hiring manager, for example, is to like lead with pure curiosity. Don't lead with, "Hi, I'm looking for work." When you're wanting to, you can mention. So I put a link in there to our career services. We have a page on informational how to conduct an informational meeting or an informational interview, and there's lots of different scenarios on there. So I would check that out. But basically, you're trying to just really briefly introduce yourself and say that, hi, I'm very interested in your, like, you're trying to show interest in the person. I'm trying to show interest in like their career journey, their role, what they've done so far. And just say like, yeah, I'm about to graduate, or I'm a recent grad, and I'm interested in pursuing this as a career. Would you be open to connecting? And just a very brief first message send. Then once they reply, then you can keep the conversation going back and forth using like the LinkedIn. I'm talking specifically about LinkedIn, using the LinkedIn messaging feature. And then you start a conversation from there. So it's really low stakes, really starting like baby steps, like one step at a time. Some people like the analogy of it's, dating. You're starting very, very slowly, starting with flattery and, hi, introducing yourself, and just kind of back and forth questions, like a tennis match, who's lobbing the ball back and forth. And then it can go into more detail as you start to get to know the person.
I can share an anecdote.
Great, thanks.
Flattery definitely works. Don't lay it on too thick. People can tell when you're being fake, but if you a genuine compliment, say it. So one of my colleagues at Cosmographic Software, I was actually her TA when she did her undergrad in astronomy at University of Western Ontario, and she reached out to me and she said, "Hi, do you remember me? Do you like working for Cosmographic? How are things?" And then she and I chatted a bit, and I was like, "Of course I remember you. Please apply. I'm gonna tell the hiring person like your name and to pick your resume out." And then I went to the person who's doing the hiring and I said, "Hi, you don't have to hire this person, but I have to insist that you pull their resume out and you read it. Please give them the time of day to at least read their resume." And now she is in a very senior role in upper like leadership in the company. So
Amazing. Great story. Thank you.
And just to piggyback on what Megan just that anecdote, I think that's actually a way more common route. Oftentimes, especially in large organizations, the hiring manager is a gatekeeper, is not actually the person doing inherently the hiring. They're the ones who sort of make the first cut based on like often keywords or basic resume fit, and then it's the team. And so, especially one of the things that I would, especially for a large organization, would try to get from the hiring manager, or have them is like, "Oh, would you be able to introduce me to anyone who's actually in the role or in the team?" Or try to figure out how is that actually going to work. Small companies, yes, the hiring manager is probably the person who's doing the work. In larger companies, it is probably somebody at HR who is interfacing with the team to actually deal with all the like the gears and cranks of what it means to hire somebody.
Wonderful. Really helpful. I think we have another one slightly geared to Samantha, but anyone else. You mentioned in your presentation that it'd be beneficial to kind of pick 15 to 20 kind of companies to kind of target. Do you have any advice for how to identify these specific companies, since when you have kind of an astro background, it seems like there's really quite a wide variety of fields that we can look at?
Thank you. Yeah, so I think just kind of, well, I have a document that I've been trying to upload it and it's not working. So I have a document it's a Word and a PDF document, and it lists a whole bunch of like companies, titles. But again, it's like, I know I didn't want to share it necessarily on the slideshow because I don't want it to limit people's ideas. I think it's just a start. It's just a baseline of possibilities to look for. And it includes also links to, there's some resources on the Canadian Job Bank and the OASIS system, which is job market data and labor market data in Canada. So links on, I think once you start looking at these links and you start finding, for example, one company that seems interesting, when you go to that company page on LinkedIn and you follow that page, look at, like, LinkedIn can be a help in this sense too, because it'll say you might be interested also in this company and following this company, and that'll kind of open up other areas and give you other possibilities. Also, when you connect with some of these professional associations and you start seeing the job postings and who's hiring in those jobs, then also that is a way of keeping track of who's hiring. And it's just a way to start. Like, there isn't like a dedicated, like, look at these companies and this is exactly who's going to hire you. You kind of have to do a little bit of digging and figuring out adjacent ways of finding those places.
Wonderful. If no one else has any thoughts on that one, we can go to our next question. I saw, Samantha, you had put some comments about this in the chat, but I think, again, great to talk out loud for everyone that, people we're hearing from our friends who are just starting to look, that they have this fear that they're kind of overqualified for entry-level jobs, or it's kind of a big concern for people coming out with a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for searching for jobs that, match your experience level? Because, people may not have industry experience, they do have like extensive experience in kind of these skills that people are looking for.
Mm-hmm. I'll start with something. I'll start with one comment, but then I invite the other panelists to chip in, because what I would say is, like, that also, I would like to invite people to kind of shift their mindset a little bit on that area as well. Instead of thinking of yourself as overqualified, are you qualified to do the job that you're looking at? Because I find that, especially, like, I have a story of one student that I worked with, and I don't want to discount all of the academic training you've received, you've done, but one person kind of came in with a bit of an attitude, I'll say, and saying, well, obviously I can do this job. Obviously, why aren't they hiring me? Why aren't they calling me for an interview? And I looked at, like, their CV that they used to apply for it, and the CV was not written at all in a way that a hiring manager would care about according to the job posting. So again, that mindset shift is very important. You're trying to emphasize the skills that you do have, the hands-on learning, applicable skills that you have to do the job. And so that if that means you're going to have to kind of, let go of having your education listed as the very first thing on your resume, then you're going to have to let that go. You're going to have to put your work experience first. And you're trying to highlight the skills that you do have, that you do bring, that are relevant to the job. And yes, you are incredibly intelligent and you will bring that also to the position, but that you have to think about what they care about, what they want from you. As far as which jobs to, like, which level, I'm not sure. If someone else wants to jump in on that part.
I will add to that, saying on my resume, my education is like kind of further down. My jobs are first. My one job outside of academia. And then for my postdoc and my PhD project, like, these are jobs. You work 40 hours a week. You get paid. I didn't write it as like thesis title. I wrote it as like, I don't know, I don't remember the wording, research something, research analyst. I don't know. I basically described my PhD work as a job and didn't say that it was my PhD thesis, but then down in the education section for my PhD and only my PhD, not my master's or my bachelor's, I wrote the thesis title down there. It was a little long. I'm sure some of you have very long thesis titles, so you could just consider just putting PhD, like the level of it. So
Yeah, I think some of this, from my experience when I was looking for jobs, comes down to a translation issue of like, especially if you're also applying to postdocs, where it's like the emphasis is on what the research and what the science is. Industry positions don't really care if you're working with a really cool cosmological simulation. That's not what they care about, and to you that might be like hard to work out how to change it. But a key thing would be is like, okay, you did all these interesting things during this project. How do you explain that in like generic analytical terms? So like rather than working on a simulation, you worked on, really large data sets, doing analytics to find these key insights, those sorts of things. Once I made that shift with my resume, I found that I was getting a lot more bites from people that were interested because it's the same skill sets, but it's just explaining to the hiring manager or the team what it means, because they don't, unless they already have a PhD, they don't really know how to pass that into industry terms.
Yeah, and I might throw in there, there's other fields that actually do this a little better than we do in terms of PhD, sort of breaking this out in this kind of education of how to approach industry. Oftentimes there are places where industry actually recognizes and needs PhDs in that field explicitly. So economics is a good example of where like most economists who have a PhD, academia is their backup, right? Entirely. Like they're going working for the World Bank or choose your favorite economic forum or something like that. The and oftentimes the way that their PhDs are structured, and this is actually very common in the United States, is that their PhD is their education. Their formal role, sorry, is to be a graduate research assistant. And they put that down as a job because that is actually what they are funded for, and they indicate that is their job. They put their teaching as a job, and their PhD is simply the thing that overhangs. And this is particularly true of PhDs where you actually don't do your research at the university. So a lot of my friends who are in public health, my wife works in public health, so that's my go-to example, where your intention for your PhD is actually to be working with a nonprofit or on the ground thing in international public health. And so that comes as a job, even though that is really there because you're doing a PhD. And so that just looks different on a resume.
I've seen something similar to that in computer science. I've interviewed people for positions at our company where their master's degree in computer science was all courses, and then their, I guess, thesis component is not writing a thesis, it's going and working for a company like us for like 6 months or whatever, and we just basically, somebody calls us at the end of the term and says, did they do the work? And then we say yes, and then they get their master's degree. So which is, I mean, you guys aren't doing computer science or what was it you said, Mubdi? Health or something?
Public health, yeah.
Yeah, so you guys aren't doing that kind of degree, so it's a little bit different, but your thesis is, and the research you did to write it, that is the job that you're going to describe.
In some ways, I'd actually even argue, because we're now in an era of large collaborations and like big multi-institutional collaborations, people within their thesis now take roles within those collaborations that are essentially jobs, right? Like one of the things that I've worked with in the past is Chime, and Chime FRB. That is a big multi-institutional collaboration where you have a role that you are doing in that collaboration. Other telescopes or big surveys, et cetera, have roles that you fill in if you're a part of VRO through any of the LSST or the Dark Energy Science Collaboration. There is a role that you have, and that is a job, right? You are getting paid. Yes, you're getting paid through your PhD to do that, but you're getting paid to do that role, and you have to deliver that as well. I've even seen people with like postdocs actually break out if their postdoc is partially academic and partially service work, breaking out their service work as a separate thing because they have actually done, like if they are there to deliver a pipeline for a telescope, they delivered the pipeline for the telescope. That is actually probably more interesting than the papers they wrote for a lot of employers.
Beautiful. Thank you. I think that would be really helpful. Another question we have from the chat is kind of now people, if you started looking and you're reading a lot of job postings, I think there's that general advice if you don't need to hit every box on a job posting before applying, but sometimes a lot of the job postings seem kind of generic or there's a lot of information on there. Do you guys have any advice with parsing out which are probably the key points to the employer that like I probably should have these so it's worthwhile to A, have a sense of what the job will be like, and then B, attempting to apply to it?
I just have a brief comment for that one. Yeah, I noticed that someone asked like half of the requirements. Okay, so the general consensus among my peers is that if you look at a job posting and you meet approximately 75 to 80% of the qualifications, you should apply. Not necessarily half, but maybe a little bit more than that. And one way to kind of decide if you do fit these qualifications is like just have the job posting open and your resume open and looking from, okay, for this requirement, do I have proof that I can do that? Yes, great. And like kind of try to connect the dots to like the dots on the job posting, the bullets on the job posting to what you have listed on your resume. If you haven't described that you have evidence of doing that, how can you word it in a way that will make sense, that will match the language on the job posting? But also, there was something else. But also remember that a job posting is a wish list as well. So the employer is wishing that their ideal candidate has all of these qualifications. And that's why if you meet 75% of them, then great, you should apply. Also, because you never know who your competition is, and you may be the most qualified person who's applying to that job. Yeah, I'll leave it to someone else.
The skill you're missing might not be the most important thing to that employer. I'm a good example. My current role, I work on the program Space Engine. It is entirely written in C++. When I applied, they were like, hey, can you program in C++? And I said, I have a little bit of experience. And they said, okay, you'll learn. We're really after your other skills. And when I started, oh boy, it was very obvious very fast that I needed to like brush up on my C++. So that's exactly what I did. I started at the end of October, and then over the Christmas break, I took like a C++ boot camp, and I came back and I was like, okay, I can do this now. And my skills have just grown from there, and now I'm a C++ wizard, which sure, it would have been a huge asset to be familiar with C++ in the first place. Maybe my first 2 months would have gone faster, but that was not the most important skill when they are looking at hiring me. So if you're missing something, you can probably learn on the job, or maybe it's your other skills that they want more.
I think part of also the game of this is the level, like the size of the employer. So in certain employers, like if you're going for a government job, those are a government or a unionized job of any sort. What is on as a requirement or as on the job posting is a requirement, because they will filter based on that, because they will get in trouble with the union or with other things if they do not do that. It is done very strictly. And oftentimes those are not the jobs where you'll see 57 crazy requirements. Unless, again, they're trying to hire somebody with the name that rhymes with Mubdi. But if you are looking for, if there are smaller organizations, sometimes the HR is just the person running the company, and the job ad is written poorly, and they just are trying to get somebody, and they think that that's what they're putting down because they don't want every single application. And so trying to, like, especially for smaller organizations, trying to start a conversation is the first way to gauge out whether or not, because surprise, surprise, people who are in the job hiring side make a lot of mistakes too.
I think that really ties into what Samantha was saying in the presentation about knowing the employer. If it's a government job, or if it's like a big company that's unionized, you're absolutely right. Like the job posting is not making it up. It's exactly what they want. But if it's a smaller company, or I don't know, it can be the Wild West out there. So look at who the employer is and think about it, whether whether this is like union mandated or not.
Very well, very helpful. We have a question kind of specifically geared to Ryan. In the presentation, we heard about this technical glass ceiling, but Ryan, you said you recently transitioned from more data science to a manager position. Did you feel you had to change your tactics greatly to get into this managerial role at the same place, or was it kind of an easier transition for you?
It's a good question. I feel like very early on, something that my place hired me because I'd done and recognized was that I'd done a lot of work during my graduate studies in like outreach and a lot of like conversing with the public. And I didn't know this at the time, but when I got hired, I spoke to my boss at the time, and she was like, part of the reason we hired you is because we think that you have a lot of experience explaining these technical things to non-technical audiences. And I work in a non-profit, so everybody I speak to outside of the 5 people in my team are a non-technical audience. And that's basically what I do every day. And so once I'd had a bit of experience doing that there, it was pretty like natural that I saw I was getting more and more responsibility of going to board meetings and going to like things in the organization where it wasn't data science related things, and I was there representing our team and our data. So I don't think I necessarily did anything differently, but it was just because I already had some of those skills and I could replicate them in the organization. I think again, this is something that a lot of us probably don't think about beforehand, that you probably have a lot of you have done a lot of this without even realizing. And I think it's something that if you can do it in an organization, it will send you in good stead of transitioning from technical to management skills. Especially if like during your PhD as well, you've worked with like summer students or things like that as well, and like done a bit of supervising, those sorts of things. All of these things just help put that together and sell you as a manager position.
Wonderful. Thank you. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that in the panel before I find another question? Perfect. Looking at our chat here, we have, I think I've seen a few questions now. It's kind of the general concern about big companies using AI for screening, or there just seems to be, you look on LinkedIn and you can sometimes see, or indeed how many applications a job has, and that can be really intimidating. So for either career advisors or people who've looked recently, do you have any kind of general advice to how do you make yourself stand out when there is truly 100 plus or more applications? How do you filter for the right jobs so it's worthwhile?
I can just add something here. I would say yes, people are using AI, and they are sending out hundreds of AI generated resumes. So when you do look at that number on LinkedIn that says, in the last 6 minutes since this was posted, 300 people have applied. Like that's just ridiculous. And it is happening though. It's a reality. And I was on a panel recently where hiring managers were speaking to just how overwhelming that is for them. So this kind of reinforces how important it is to connect with people, to reach out to them, to try to start a message to indicate that you are a real human and you have or you will be applying or you're interested in applying, and just trying to start that human connection, because it is a reality of what we're facing right now. So it's tricky, and yeah, so connect, really really try to connect with people is what I would say.
I can comment.
Oh, yes, sorry, go on.
Go ahead. I've talked a lot.
Oh, I was just gonna say we hired recently, and it was the first time I'd gone through that process, so it was a fun experience. But we obviously don't. We're a small organization. We don't use AI to screen things. We use the traditional approach of a HR team, and then our like team vets them afterwards. But doing it for maybe 100 applicants that we had for the one job, it became very clear very quickly who had written the application using AI. And we essentially decided that if it was pretty obvious to us that that was the case, we immediately discarded those applications. That was a personal choice that we made. I'm not saying everybody will do that, but I think it's worth trying to invest the time to make it clear that a human wrote the application and it's not just like automatically generated if you can. I know it's frustrating because some companies will do the opposite to you and they will filter you out using AI. But it is worth trying to put that effort in, especially if it's a job that you're really interested in getting, because that personal approach is part of the reason that we made the hiring decisions that we did.
I just wanted to comment on that thing on LinkedIn where you see a job posting and it says, 400 people have applied to this or whatever. It's incredibly misleading. We were talking a lot about knowing the employer, tailoring your resume. Those 400 people within the first 6 minutes, they have not tailored their resume. They have not done the research. They don't have a connection. They don't understand the company. We used to advertise our jobs on LinkedIn and we would get 1,000 applications in a day that were all useless. And then LinkedIn, behind the scenes here, will cap how many applicants you can receive, and you have to pay them to open it to more people. So we don't advertise on LinkedIn anymore. We will talk about it, like we'll post as the company and talk about the job, but then we will redirect you to Works with Indies, which is a common company for small video game companies to hire through, or just directly to our website where when we are hiring, a careers tab appears, and then you can click that and submit through our system where we can, that extra hurdle of even going to our website and looking at it and clicking a few more buttons will filter out so many people. So do not be dismayed when you see that LinkedIn, this thing that says 300 people have applied in the last 24 hours. Those 300 people they're not doing the work that you're doing, and they're not your competition.
Just to add to what Megan said, so we stopped, we definitely advertised on LinkedIn for our jobs, but we've removed the easy apply thing entirely. Because it was mostly trash that we were getting. And on the counter side, from an employer's perspective, advertising on these sites is actually quite expensive, right? The entire job process of hiring somebody is actually quite expensive. And our mentality, at least, my mentality, I can't speak for every employer, but is you don't want a failed hire. There's very little that's as bad as hiring the wrong person, them, being toxic on your team, and then leaving, right? Like that is absolutely the nightmare scenario. So what we're trying to do often is trying to find the person that is the lowest risk for us. That often means that really fantastic traits and fantastic people get overlooked. But from a perspective of an organization, we're trying to minimize risk to sort of our established teams and our established what we're doing. And so, remembering that that's the mindset that a lot of people who are hiring are thinking about. How can we make sure that this will work?
Well, I think it's a little more encouraging. We have about 6 minutes left. I'm seeing a lot of questions I could kind of lump together, and any other thoughts you guys have in the last few minutes, we'd be happy to hear. But I think people traditionally think of LinkedIn or Indeed and these sites with a lot of applications. So I think, Megan, you mentioned that in the video game site I had never heard of. Is there other maybe more specific job boards, or should we be kind of going maybe more directly to a company's websites? Is there better places to apply that aren't overwhelmed in this kind of way?
I would definitely say the AAS job register, right? So beyond the postdocs and beyond the faculty, visiting faculty, there is the people who are doing science that are not in an academic institution. And then there are the people they just want to hire astronomers because they like astronomers and they might be doing something different. That gets updated monthly, so definitely go monthly. It is relatively expensive for universities, not expensive for larger organizations. So a lot of private companies will keep their jobs up for a while on there. But definitely revisiting that is a good place because that's sort of the international repository of, hey, I'm looking for an astronomer.
I'm signed up for 2 newsletters. One is Tech Jobs for Good. I can drop that in the chat. And another one is Deep Learning Weekly. Deep Learning Weekly isn't explicitly job advertisements, but they will occasionally advertise them there. It's mostly just a newsletter. But there are other subfield specific things. So in the gaming industry, there's a few different things, but women in games, it's more specifically for women and non-binary folks, but I'm sure, as with most women's spaces, men are usually welcome if you come as an ally with good intentions. But women in games, they have a Discord where they just post jobs, which is awesome. I'll put all of those into the chat. And these are just ones I've discovered along the way. I'm sure there are lots.
Yeah, I don't really have any other ones that I use. The Take Jobs for Good one is where I ended up finding my place through. But I guess more generally, I would just say, if at all possible, don't use LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever to apply through. If they have like a direct apply option, always go with that option. I know it's sometimes nice. It feels easier to use the quick apply options, but trust me, it from an employer perspective, they're much more likely to pay attention to the applications that come direct.
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to find out about jobs and connect with people. It's not a good place to apply for a job.
I'll throw a quick plug in for a friend of mine who is a former CETA postdoc who years ago left astronomy and like worked in bioinformatics, has actually started and is now in NVIDIA, has now actually started a newsletter called Research Computing Teams. I put a link in there. They do I believe it's a weekly email that has a ton of jobs at the end for people specifically with backgrounds in research computing.
Wonderful. I'm not seeing any more questions. I do think Samantha said she would share the slides, so we'll send that out after. And at some point the recording will be available. But why don't we all thank you so much to it'll be on our website. Thank you, Brianna. We'll have the recording and the slides available for everyone. Thank you so much to all our speakers and panelists. I think this was really wonderful and helpful.
Thank you for inviting us. It's so nice to chat and see lots of familiar names. I know I've met some of you at CASCAs of the past. And good luck finishing your degrees and good luck on your job hunt.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just to say, you can do it. If you want to find an industry position, you will be able to find an industry position. They are out there for you. It's definitely an attainable goal.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed being here today. Thanks a lot.
And had a lot of fun. And for those who are interested, definitely look out for job postings that we'll be doing probably at the end of the year.
Yeah, Cosmographic will be hiring in late 2027. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all of you and to everyone who came. We will have our next session on marketability, so taking your astronomy skills and a session entirely devoted to turning your astronomy skills into industry skills on July 8th. And yes, thank you very, very much to all of our speakers. We really, really appreciate all the effort and time that you put into being here today.